Hi there, welcome to Pleasure Pathways, your go-to destination for empowering, informative, and fun content on sexual wellness and intimacy. Whether you're looking for expert tips, personal insights, or product reviews, we've got you covered. I'm your host, Venus O'Hara, and I'll be accompanying you on this pathway to pleasure. Today, let's talk about first dates. Oh my God, they are so awkward. I don't know about you, but I find dating very awkward, especially first dates. All these expectations. Walking to the first date, I'm like, oh my God, am I really this lonely? Am I really this? Yeah, it's crazy because sometimes we don't spend enough time focusing on this part of our lives, which is also very important. And I think we have this desire to connect with people, yet when we are in that situation, we are so uncomfortable. Is that the same for you? Before I go into some dating tips for a successful first date, I want to let you know that there are no right or wrong answers. Everyone has different ideas about what to do on a first date, and that can depend on different cultures, for example, or it can depend on what you're looking for as well. So what I'm going to share with you today is some of my own ideas with some pros and cons with each piece of advice. Let's dive in. So before you get to the first date stage, many people connect on dating apps, and some people want to have very minimal chat back and forth, and they want to meet in person so that they can find out straight away whether there is a vibe there or not. Whereas other people prefer to chat for a while, get to know each other online with messages, and then meet in person. There's pros and cons for each method here. If you wait a long time, sometimes you build up this image in your mind of this ideal person because they're saying everything you want to read or hear when they are messaging. But then in person, it can be so disappointing. Maybe you just don't like their energy. Maybe you don't like their pheromones, or perhaps it's just so awkward because everything you had in your mind about that person was a projection. It wasn't really who they are. And on the other hand, if you're just meeting someone without going into too many details about who they are, it can also feel a little bit random and awkward. So different strokes for different folks there. It definitely is a personal decision. But I think it's best to be clear about what you're looking for even before that first date. And also, don't have the date or connection or sex as your objective. It can just be, let's just meet for a friendly coffee and see what happens. And have, let's say, friendship or just that coffee or that moment to have a nice time as you possibly can as the objective. And that enables you to manage your expectations and avoid disappointment. So where should you go on a first date? I know lots of friends who like to go on a walk. That's kind of a nice thing to do because you can walk and then talk about what you're seeing around you. You're doing an activity which might be okay for those awkward silences. I like walking personally. So if I was going on a walking date, I would like to be with someone who wants to go somewhere in nature and who has a good walking rhythm, because I like to walk kind of fast. So that would be a good thing for me to do. Another way to have a date is just a very quick coffee or a tea in the afternoon. That's a very easy way to connect with someone because that only takes half an hour of your time. And hopefully, if it's not too awkward, it won't go by so slowly that it seems eternal. And it's kind of a low investment of your time and energy to have a coffee with someone. I remember years ago, people used to go for dinner dates, and I think that's okay for second, third dates when you've established that there is a vibe there. But first of all, I think it's best to have a short amount of time and also always have a plan at the end. So if it doesn't really work out, you've got somewhere else to go. You know, if you don't have somewhere else to go, maybe you could stay if it ends up being very successful, or if you actually do have something to do after, then it can leave you wanting more, which is a wonderful feeling to have because then you'll want to have a second date. I personally think it's best to meet in daylight and not with alcohol. I think it's good to meet in daylight for a tea, for juice, or coffee, something like that, for a short amount of time. So you can see if you like that person or not. Because nighttime, your judgment can get a little bit hazy if you are drinking alcohol, etc. So that's a good thing to do. Maybe more daytime for more sober decision making. Also, if you're shy, something you can do if you're not used to speaking to people you don't know that well, you can do an activity such as bowling or even going to see a film or theatre, something like that. And then you can discuss it after. You'll have something to talk about then that's not each other, or maybe even a painting class, something like that. Or if you're very brave, or even a comedy show, that's kind of a cool thing to do. And also maybe you could go out with some friends or invite them to join your friend's circle, and that can be a nice situation to see if they blend in with your friends or not. And if it doesn't really quite work out, then at least there are other people there to dilute the awkwardness. But the best date, in my opinion, is imagine you have a similar hobby. Imagine you like dancing salsa, bachata, or even a different type of dance. That could be a really great way to connect with someone, doing something that you both really enjoy. Maybe you like rock climbing or something like that. That can be a wonderful way to connect with someone. Because I do think it's a good idea when you are looking for love, looking for a partner, to actually go to places or explore your hobbies more in depth, because it's good to connect with like-minded people. If you share a hobby, that can be a wonderful thing to share, explore together if a relationship or even a friendship emerges from that date. Something that's very awkward during first dates is conversation with someone you don't know that well. And even for me, I'm quite talkative, sometimes feels like a sentimental job interview. And what you should or shouldn't talk about on a date is very subjective. I think it's important to establish what you're looking for, what the objective of the date is. Even if it's not with that person, you could just clear about what you're looking for. Or maybe you just want to see if you get on at first. But I know people who would say they want to mention in the very first date that they are looking for, let's say, marriage or the father or mother of their children, so that they can eliminate the people who are not looking for the same things so they don't waste time. That's purely subjective and depends on how sure you are about what you're looking for. A few good questions could be, what is something you are working on right now? What is your favorite childhood memory? Or if money and time wasn't an issue, what would your perfect day be like? Or even you could ask, what would your perfect holiday be like? Your perfect vacation, to know if you are on the same page or not. We always ask people that we are meeting for the first time about their profession. What do you do? And that's a very superficial question. But a better question to ask is, what inspired you to choose this path? And there you're going to get a much deeper answer and you'll get to know more about that person. And what about your last relationship? I know people who think you should not speak about your exes in a date, but I think it's kind of interesting. I want to know what someone has experienced in the past, how long it has been since their last relationship, what were the issues, what are they looking for now? What did they learn? It can't be too much, of course, talking about the ex, but I do find it intriguing because I do believe that people have patterns. And if it's someone who is criticizing their ex over and over as if they were the person to blame for the ending or the struggles in that relationship, then that for me would be a red flag. I think it's good to acknowledge that maybe if it has been a bad ending, that both parties had something to play. But also, I think someone who is, ended very badly in their last relationship, for me would be, I'm intrigued about that personally. Yeah, I want to know what someone's patterns, what their perceived limitations are, and whether they have learnt the lessons of their past as well. So they are coming to this situation with some newfound knowledge and good intentions, and intentions to grow. I actually watched a really interesting series recently called The Later Daters. It's on Netflix and it follows some daters, later daters, hence the name, who are in their late 50s, 60s, and I think there's a 70-year-old there as well. And it follows their dating journey. And they have a dating coach. And the dating coach always says about conversation, be interested, not interesting. I think it's interesting, that perspective. However, if I was on a date, I was just interested in the other person's life, I would come home and I would feel, wow, they didn't ask me any questions. I think it's important to show some kind of curiosity, and so that can be quite equal in a way. So you're talking about each other and there's curiosity on both sides, asking questions on both sides. If someone asks you a question, you can answer and then say, and what about you? So you get their perspective as well. I think that's really important. I remember recently I met this guy. It wasn't a date. He was very interested in my profession and everything I was doing. So he asked me so many questions, and I was loving it. I just love talking about myself. But it got to a point where we've been speaking for about 20 minutes, and I realized that it's not a one-sided thing, even though he was very curious. So that kind of created a bit more balance in our conversation. I think that's important to know as well. I know if you had something, you've got a lot of things to be proud of, you want a lot to say, I think it's important to establish some kind of balance between talking about you and talking about them, and balance in curiosity. That's so important. So what about sex on the first date? Well, that all depends on the energy, how good the energy is. Personally, my personal rule is only if I know that person before. Because you can have a first date with someone that's been in your friendship circles for a while. Maybe you already feel safe and comfortable with that person, and then that date is maybe taking the friendship to another level, and why not if you're both up for it? But I think it's better, I think it's not a moral judgment, it's just I think it's nicer to wait a little bit so you can be convinced of your choice. I think 3 is the magic number. For example, first date is just kind of like curiosity, establishing contact. Second date is affirmation, confirmation of that mutual desire. And then third date, bingo. But of course it can be longer than that. It's just whenever you feel ready. But sometimes if you go too fast, that can kill that desire for more. It can kind of kill the mystery quite soon. And if you're more interested in something more sentimental, it can be nice to take a little bit longer. Subsequent dates, you can start talking about sex. Might not be so good. Well, talking about sex on the first date, I think it depends unless there's a really obvious vibe there. But in general, I would say it probably isn't a good idea. I think it's best to kind of let that attraction arise naturally and then see what happens. Because then when you have, after the first date, you can have some follow-up and see if there's any kind of flirting there, etc. But in general, it's nice to kind of cultivate that mystery as long as possible until you finally give in and wow, explode. That's my personal experience, or personal opinion anyway. I think if you go too fast, sometimes you lose interest very quickly. So maybe that just ends. But of course, whatever you do, you have to be comfortable with it. There has to be mutual desire, mutual consent, and hopefully it'll be good. And of course, one thing that's very important if you do decide to have sex is to know what's happening after. Some people, sex is always a very sentimental thing to do, whereas for others, it's not. So not everyone has the same idea or about what sex means. So I think that's important to establish before you get into bed with someone, to understand what is the objective, what is the intention here. Is it just to enjoy an evening, or is it the start of something? Because then you're going to open up a lot of other discussions about exclusivity. Are you still going to stay on the app after that sexual encounter has happened? So always be sure that you are on the same page no matter what happens. And of course, this is very important, I didn't mention earlier, be honest about your age, your profession, your relationship status. Don't pretend you're single if you're not. That's so important, because the truth will come out sooner or later. It's important to be loved and desired for who you are authentically. What about you? What are your tips for a successful first date? Don't hesitate to leave a comment so we can all learn and grow. Thank you for watching. You can find our products on our website, tracysdog.com, or on Amazon. And don't forget to check out our blog for more in-depth articles on tracysdog.com. And follow us on Spotify for our latest podcasts. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Thanks for being here on Pleasure Pathways. Mwah.